Right then, welcome to another lovely video yet again on the Micra. That's what this channel's about, is the Micra. So all content's about the Micra. I don't know why I keep saying it. So it's the British bank holiday, which means the entirety of the UK is pretty much closed from Thursday to Sunday. So I'm going to use this opportunity to get as much done on the Micra as possible, because we've only got 18 days until brands hatch. So we've got a lot to do in that time. How much, do you ask? Well, luckily for you, I wrote it all down on the board, so I'm not going to list it all off. If you want to pause the video and just sort of have a look at what we're doing. But yeah, this is the list that we've got to do over the next couple of days. Now, it looks like a lot, but a lot of this stuff is literally 2-minute jobs. Some jobs are maybe an hour, some jobs half hour, maybe some jobs a couple of hours. So we're going to try and chip away at a bit in segments. Yeah, just hopefully try and get as much done before Haltech coming back Monday, Tuesday next week to finish the wiring. So hopefully we'll hear the car run next week. Right then, what should we work on first? I think it only makes sense to start with the top left. That's the first thing I wrote down. So I think we'll mount the radiator, because once we've got the radiator done, we can mount the water pump, and once we've got that done, we can mount the radiator hoses. Is there anything else we can do? And obviously we can mount the fan. I haven't got the fan because Demon Tweaks haven't sent it. So yeah, we're going to start with the radiator. So last year we used one of these. This is a EG Civic radiator. They're cheap and cheerful to get off the eBay. They're the right size to fit in the gap that we've got, and a nice little improvement over the factory Micra radiator. Now we need to move this top inlet over so we can clear the downpipe, and we also need to move the outlet at the bottom because of where it is against the radiator. So this is the radiator we used last year. So again, another EG Civic radiator that I modified. So it's seen better days. As you can see here, the fan's caught it a couple of times. We had a point where it popped out of the mounting bracket and sort of rubbed against the intercooler. I mean, quite lucky it didn't leak there. So obviously I've bought a brand new one, so we're going to do the same thing now. Now I have planned, and I've actually done all the CAD work for it, is to weld brand new end tanks on there rather than do all this sort of little dodgy patchwork. But I'll be honest with you, I've not got the time to get it done, and it's going to be much quicker just to modify this and move stuff and block stuff off rather than piss around on the CNC for a bit. As much as I'd love to do another CNC stuff, time is of the essence, so we'll do this for now, and if we need to change it at some point, I'll build a new radiator for it. It's not a problem. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. Let's modify the radiator, little time lapse for you, and then we'll go back to you when it's done. So have fun.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
So that's step one done. We've cut the old hose tails off and we've blanked them off. Yes, I could have used some round sections, but square is just much easier to cut, and it's done a good job. And then we've cut some fresh tube, we've bead rolled it, and then we've welded it to the end tanks. So the next thing we need to do is we need to weld some bits onto the bottom here to locate it into the rubbers that I put on the support beam, if you remember, a couple of videos ago. So yeah, we'll chop the old ones off first. We'll get this up in the air, we'll put the rad where we need it, I'll poke a pen through, mark where we need to put some shit onto it, weld them on. Job's a good one.
Over fame, the cycle stays the same. Freedom over cycle stays. freedom.
Right, so next what we got to do is we need to put some sort of bracket on it to stop it moving forward and backwards. I've been from a stash of brackets and I found this. So I'm just going to put that on there, put a bit of a fold around it and weld it onto the side of the radiator. There we go, that is the radiator complete. Next task, the most logical thing to do would be to mount the water pump. Right, so now we're going to install the Davies Craig water pump. Pretty simple job on this actually. Simply attach it onto the bottom hose there off the radiator from this outlet here to the thermostat housing. So for the electric water pump to work correctly, we need to remove the thermostat. Pretty simple job, which is 3 10mm bolts here, but we need to remove this entire housing anyway to trim this part down. So let's get this taken off, thermostat out, this bit trimmed down, put it back on, and then we can actually start doing the hose work for it. Back together. We've managed to clear the downpipe now by trimming this top rad hose outlet. We've trimmed these down and capped them off, and we've got both hoses on. So now we just need to get it up in the air and start sizing up for the water pump. So what we need to do now is just mount the water pump on there and then just trim this radiator hose down to go into the pump. So what that's going to be a pretty simple job. Just need to trim a bit of silicone down to join the pump and the radiator, and then we can deal with the top part after that. So luckily I found a nice 1.5" silicone joiner on the shelf that goes onto the bottom like that. Now there's no brackets or anything to hold this in place, it's all supported by the radiator hoses, which is pretty cool. So yeah, all I've got to do now is trim this top hose here, make a little beaded aluminium joiner to join the reducer from 1.5" to 28mm, because unfortunately that's what size the radiator hoses are, and that's this job done. Now, except for some hose clips, which unfortunately I've not got any in the right size, we're going to call that water pump mounting job done.
Stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
Right, so next, as a bit of a continuation to the radiator, I think I want to get the oil cooler done, which means we can get the oil cooler lines done, which is somewhere on here, and then I think I'm then going to tackle the oil drain and oil feed. So here's one oil cooler. My current plan is to mount it in front of the radiator like so, with some brackets. I think that should work nicely, and then we'll take the hoses over the top of the radiator here down to the back of the engine to the sandwich plate. So I think before I go any further is we're just going to take this elbow off so we can get the grill on, then that will give us a good indication of what we need to trim.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same.
So we've got the grill cable tied on, just sort of gives us a rough indication of what space we've got to work with in between the grill and the radiator. And looking at it, we could put it in direct airflow there in the grill. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make some brackets off the top of the radiator here, maybe the side radiator, I've not decided. We're going to mount the oil cooler to the radiator using these top holes. The reason being is if we ever wanted to put a larger oil cooler on, because I think we could probably actually get a 16 row in there, maybe a 19 row before we start interfering with the intercooler. So that just gives us a bit of headroom for, you know, just in case we need to change it in the future. So let's get the rad off, let's make some brackets, let's do a montage. So just a couple of things that we need to consider when mounting this is this hose here. Obviously when it's fully tightened down now, where I wanted to initially mount it, which would have been about here, the hose fitting would foul the radiator, and there's not enough room here to sort of like curve it. So I think what we're going to have to do is mount it up a bit higher so we can actually angle the oil line over the top of the radiator like this, and that'll give some clearance to go across the engine bay. So yeah, food for thought.
Freedom over fame, freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
There we go, that's the oil cooler mounted. Pretty happy with that. As you can see, we can just about get the fittings over the top of the radiator if we need to. And we've got some pretty decent clearance there. So yeah, let's get that one wiped off the board.
Freedom over fame, freedom over fame, freedom over fame.
So next we're going to tackle the turbo oil feed and drain. As part of that, we're going to have to fit a sandwich plate, and I believe I've actually missed it off this list. Well, there's a sandwich plate, but what I haven't put on here, the oil cooler lines. Obviously we've mounted it, we need to do the lines. So yeah, that's what we're going to do next. So the oil drain's going to be a bit tricky. As you see, there's probably not a lot of space down there, but we're going to have to sort of aim it in between, about where my finger is, in between these primaries, and then we can send it down towards below the back of the supercharger to a fitting on the sump. So that's definitely going to be an awkward one to do, but I think that's going to be the longest thing to do. So yeah, just do another quick sick montage again. Right, so to tackle the oil drain, I've got some 16mm stainless bends, and I've got myself a stainless flange. So I've already taken the turbo off. We need to feed it through this hole here and down the back of the supercharger bracket into the sump return.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame.
So we've got those two bits tacked up. We've got the turbo just sort of back on the manifold, and we kind of flukily got it pointing in roughly the right direction. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to set the downpipe off so I can put my hand around the back so I can hold it and mark up for the next piece. But I think we're definitely on the right track with this. Tacked another piece on, and we're definitely going in the right direction. If we get the torch down there so you can have a look. This is on the back side. So all I really need to do now is just weld a straight section onto that piece there, put a bead on it, and that'll be the oil drain completo.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
And there we go, one turbo oil drain return thingy. So we're going to get this bolted back to the turbo. We're going to put the turbo back on the engine, and yeah, we'll see what we're going to do next.
Cycle stays the same.
There There we go, spotty dog. Just going to shine a torch around the back here so you can sort of see the gaps around the tube. So we're not touching, we've maybe got like a 5mm gap either side before we're touching the manifold, which I think is plenty of room. And let's have a look around the back here. And there we go, we've got room to get a hose on there, that's for sure. So I think the next logical thing to do while we're here is let's get the sump off. Because I've got a brand spanking new sump to put on, and let's put an oil return in it, and then we can do the rubber hose from the drain to the sump drain, and then we have to make sure it clears the downpipe and everything. So yeah, let's get the sump off.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom.
This is the new sump going on. I think we want to be having the oil return sort of about here. However, the problem that we've got now is I don't really want to put the oil return too low in the pan because the oil won't drain correctly, but either way we've got a bit of this baffle plate in the way. So I think what I'm going to have to do is, I don't really need to cut much out of it, but I believe I'm going to have to cut this section out here just so I can get room on the back side to get the nut on the fitting. And this is the fitting that we're going to be using. It's a 5/8 or a 16 degree, 90 degree elbow. I use these on all the sump returns that we do because they're a nice little piece what you get. It saves grinding away all the paint, and then obviously then go for the hassle of having to repaint it and everything. Whereas this, you just put a couple of doughty washes in there, job's a good one.
Cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
There we go, the sump's all back on. We've torqued, when I mean torqued, the uggered, all the bolts back in. I am kidding, I have torqued them. Anyway, so now the next part is get a bit of hose from there. Let's see how it goes. Let's put a downpipe on and check for clearance. And there she blows. So I'm actually not going to use this piece of silicone that I put in because it's not oil resistant. So but at least I've got the right size. At least I know it clears the manifold and the supercharger. And I have just put the downpipe on, and we've got about a finger's gap in between there and the downpipe. So I may need to look at putting some sheathing on there. I'm pretty sure I've got some heat barrier wrap somewhere. Yeah, so yeah, another job complete. So we can come over to the board and we can get rid of turbo oil drain. Sure, there's a bit. Yep, sump oil drain. Nice. So yeah, we've actually tackled quite a bit today, which is pretty sick. Right, so next we're going to get on with the turbo oil feed and the sandwich plate, and also make the hoses for the oil cooler. So we'll start by getting the old oil filter off, and then we can get the sandwich plate on, and we can get moseying on with all the hoses.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
And one turbo oil feed. So we've put some P-clips on here just to sort of make it look a bit neater. So yeah, that's the oil cooler lines done as well. So we come over to the list and we can take one more thing off the list. So we're going to do one last thing to finish this episode off, and in that we're going to do the fuel lines. So we've got a Cytec adjustable fuel pressure regulator in there. We don't need to put a gauge in it because we've got a Haltech fuel pressure sensor, so the Haltech will tell us all the fuel pressure data. We've got a Cytec fuel filter down there. So all we need to do now is put the inlet manifold on, and then we can get making all of these fuel lines.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over. Freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
Right, so there we go. We've got all the fuel plumbing done. We've got our feed line here from the tank into the filter, from the filter to the fuel rail, from the fuel rail to the regulator, from the regulator return to the fuel tank. Overall, I'm happy with how that's come out. It's certainly going to function. I'm just missing one fitting off here. I can't find it. I've ordered it. That's literally the last piece of the puzzle for the fuel system. And you know what that means? That means we can come over here and we can wipe it off the board. We're getting through that list gradually. So I'm going to leave that here for this video. So everything that you've just watched is over a 2-day period of me working solidly. I've got another day left on the car, which will be Saturday the 4th of June. But we're in a stage now where the engine can run. We've got a couple of things to do in the next video. Just because this video is going to be too long as it is of all the stuff that we've done, so I'm going to separate into 2 different videos. Anyway, I'm waffling on. So yeah, thank you for watching and all that jazz, and we'll see you very shortly in the next video, hopefully in the next couple of days. So yeah, see you then.